Welcome to the Wellbeing and Career World podcast. We're diving deep into the power of intuition, especially in high-stakes environments like the ER. My guest, Jenn Johnson, has spent years as an ER nurse in Canada, and along the way she discovered something remarkable. She could often sense what was going on with her patients before the test confirmed it. Jenn shares her journey of learning to trust her gut, the science behind intuition, and how it became an essential part of her patient care. But it wasn't just her patients that pushed her to grow. Jenn also faced intense bullying in the workplace, forcing her to leave jobs and confront toxic environments head on. Today she walks us through those experiences, how she handled each one, and the lessons she took with every step of the way. Jenn is now gearing up to release her book, Nursing Intuition, where she'll explore more about the science and art of trusting your instincts in patient care. Jenn's experiences both in the ER and in dealing with challenging co-workers have given her invaluable insights, and we can't wait for you to hear more. You can connect with Jenn at www.nursejenn.ca to learn more about her work. So let's get started. And on today's podcast, we're chatting about trusting your gut, the power of intuition in nursing with Jenn Johnson. A very good afternoon today, Jenn. Where are you right now on planet Earth?
Planet Earth. I'm currently in Hamilton, Ontario, which is about an hour outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Okay, make people quite jealous. So if you're trying to say you're doing a TripAdvisor review, so what's
Yes.
it like where you are? Give me a setting. Let me look out as if you're looking out the window right now, or if you're looking at a wall, just pretend. So,
So I'm in a lovely little suburban area. It's very Stepford Wives, kind of cutesy and easygoing. If you get down into lower Hamilton, which is closer to Lake Ontario and on the edge there, very blue collar, hardworking, kind of a dirty steel town. So it has a history of being a steel town or hammer town, as they like to call it. And one of their main exports through, almost more than 100 years, I think, has been steel. So it's, very down to earth, blue collar, kind of your average Joe. And that's kind of the best part is that, nobody takes themselves too seriously around here.
right. And in relation to, if anybody never seen the Stepford Wives, what is the Stepford Wives? Is that like very
Stepford
high
Wives.
tea and like
Yes.
biscuits type of stuff?
So the Stepford Wives are, very exceedingly well put together. Everything's from how they're dressed to their makeup to their hair is very well done. And, it feels like everything is just about image. Everybody's putting out the best image they can, when in reality, it's not quite that way. But the town, because it's a newer subdivision, is very new and everything's, pretty and well put together. And we're just kind of waiting for the town to kind of settle a bit, but
Right.
we keep growing bigger, and we kind of, I think, I don't even know if Hamilton's like 120,000 people at this point, but or even, oh, I don't even know. I should look at the signs when I go to work and come back. But it's pretty big, and it's one of the kind of the main stops in between Toronto and Niagara Falls.
Right.
So
And
everybody knows.
what's it like living in that environment from your own opinion? We're obviously not going to criticize any of your neighbors
No.
right now, but is it very Instagram-like as well? Is it kind of, do you have to leave the house looking wonderful? Or do you ever
Oh
just go,
God,
ah, look,
no.
what the hell? I'm out of here.
No. I hold no punches about this is who I am, and what you see is what you get kind of thing. So this morning I walked my kids to school in like track pants and a ratty old t-shirt with my hair up in one of the signature messy mom buns.
All right.
So,
Well done.
you know, I don't kind of subscribe to that. It just feels a little bit too fake for me, because this is real life and I don't have time for that.
That's fair enough. So what's the weather like? So promote the weather where you are. Are
Yes.
we still
The
nice
weather
kind of
is
summery weather?
the weather is still gorgeous. It is a bright sunny day. Few clouds here and there, but I think we're still about 20 to 22 degrees Celsius, which is a beautiful average day for us, kind of September wise.
Okay, you're definitely going to get a job. In the Weather Channel. You've really sold yourself there, you have, Jennifer. So let's chat a bit more about your background and kind of nursing and everything else. So start from the beginning. Go ahead.
Yes. So I ended up actually starting in biology. So I went to school for a biology degree, got about halfway through, and in my second year, I failed the first half of organic chemistry. So ended up very quickly realizing that biology at Lakehead University, which is Thunder Bay, which is very, very North Canada, your typical very cold, kind of a lot longer than average kind of place, but they're known for their forestry department. So everything was plant-based. So I'm like, this isn't quite what I'm going for. So I'm gonna swap into to nursing, and it was by far the best decision I've ever made. Getting into my first job in a very, very rural area. So this little town that had less than 5,000 people living in it. You know, the ER, there was one registered nurse for the ER and one registered nurse and two registered practical nurses for the floor, which was about 14 beds. And then we had kind of long-term care, extended care attached to that as well, with another registered practical nurse and a couple CNAs or nursing aides. And, you know, it was either the day was really, really slow and you wouldn't even see one person come into the ER, or, you know, you kind of got a busier day where there actually was a car accident and you had to kind of figure out what you were doing because you're still new to nursing and never worked in emergency nursing and kind of put it together. So through the years, doing a bunch of education and trying to figure out, you know, all the things that I didn't know and falling in love with emergency nursing and just kind of the very quick in and out and, you know, putting big band-aids on big issues and not worrying really too much about the little issues. And, you know, one emergency here, it kind of eats up 2 hours and then you're off to the races doing something else. Very, you know, the joke is that a lot of undiagnosed ADHDers are work in the ER because it fits the personality, right? Like you have a
Right.
lot of things going on. You have, you know, six different patients with all different levels of like, have they seen the doc yet? Are we treating them? Are we waiting for test results? Are they ready to be discharged? And kind of the the door doesn't stop to emerge. It's always open. So you know, everything can change in an instant, and that's half the fun of the ER.
So you mentioned in regards to like, car accidents or so how did you prepare yourself? So anybody that wants a career now in nursing for the future in the medical field,
Yeah.
how that first sight of blood or whatever you see, you don't have to go back to that memory,
Yeah.
but how did you manage it? Did you, because sometimes you watch these programs, obviously like ER, I believe
Yeah.
it was St. Elsewhere years ago, where the newbie on the block would throw up kind of when the first time they've seen some blood or even Scrubs. I think Scrubs show
Yep.
TV comedy show, which is brilliant. I think they kind of make a good fun of it. But how did you feel
Yes.
yourself the first time?
Yeah, you know, you have a lot of experiences in clinical education, like as you're going through school. So there's a lot of blocks where you're doing different things. So one 6-week block is like learning how to talk to people in long-term care homes. There's one block about mental health. There's one block about children. There's one block about labor and delivery. And there's also a lot of medical surgical nursing, which is primarily, you know, you're not sick enough for the ICU, but you're not well enough to go home kind of scenario. So you end up on these medical surgical wards. And so a lot of the base is that. And, you know, you get very good very quickly at being able to kind of hide your emotions a little bit and gauge your reactions. I don't know when the first time I really saw anything kind of way out there even was, but I do remember like in our very first placement, a really good friend of mine who her mother was a nurse. And so she kind of had this head start on all the rest of us where she'd grown up with a nurse. So she already kind of knew the lingo. She already kind of knew what to expect. And so we go in, and this patient just needs to have their bottom cleaned up and put in a new brief and changed into day clothes and then helped get out of bed and into their wheelchair. And I don't know why, but turn them over, start wiping to make sure everything's clean, and my buddy passes out in the corner.
All
And I'm going,
right.
I did not see that coming. I didn't think she'd be the one of us to faint. Like, oh my gosh, like
Right.
that's kind of crazy, but you get used to the blood and the there's not a ton of gore. Like obviously the television shows want to make it as dramatic and fast-paced and anxiety producing as everything. But in reality, like the number of times where there's been more than, I don't know, like a pint of blood, so 350 mils of blood has been kind of few and far between, truly. And there's only been a couple of instances where I've even seen, bone sticking out of skin kind of
Oh,
thing.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. But it doesn't happen that often, like truly, because we're usually pretty good about, here in Canada, you have to wear a helmet if you're on a motorcycle, have to wear seat belts, you got to do all these things to kind of keep you safe. And so really, thankfully, you're not seeing kind of the worst of the worst. I did used to work at a trauma center in the ER, and there were some pretty crazy things that kind of came in and out from the outer areas. So they bring everything out from the outer areas or the outer towns, and anything that was sick enough, they had to be moved to us to kind of for us to care for them because we were kind of the trauma center. And having somebody sitting there with a bow and arrow sticking out of the middle of their neck, and they're still awake and talking,
Wow.
and you're going, well, that's interesting, you know? And you feel like, oh, we have to get all these things done. But because they'd come from a different facility, everything was already done for them, right? Like the bandages were on, the IVs were started, we already knew what was going on. So truly, that patient just waited in the ER for maybe an hour or two while the trauma team saw them, and then they were whisked off to surgery. So we really didn't even do a lot to them. So always kudos to the smaller and rural hospitals who send things to the bigger ones, because sometimes the bigger ones forget how bad things are before we kind of put a band-aid on them and send them off to you.
Right.
So it's always, you kind of have to keep in your mind that everybody's doing the best that they can with what they've got. And if you've never worked at that other facility, you have no idea what they have access to.
And who makes a decision then, Jen, in relation to which has priority or not? So, say, for example, you mentioned you had the person with the arrow in them, and then some maybe it's a sick
Yep.
child or somebody else. Who
Yep.
who would make that call to decide, right,
Yeah.
this is
So that's
priority?
that's triage for the most part. So when you first come into the emergency room or the A&E, you come and see the nurse first and foremost. And so in Canada, we've got the Canadian Triage and Acuity Scale, so CTAS. And so on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being dead or near dead and needs to be seen immediately, to a 5 where you probably should have gone to see your family doc a week ago with this concern. You kind of have that range of sick, not sick. And so at triage, it's our job to kind of take a quick look at somebody and go, okay, here's a set of vitals, here's your past medical history, here's the medications you're taking every day. What's going on with what's bringing you in today. So somebody who is having chest pains, that's a heart attack until proven otherwise. There's lots and lots and lots of reasons as to why people can have chest pain, whether it's lung versus your heart versus your muscles, or even a panic attack kind of thing. But you have to go to the sickest option first because you don't want to, heaven forbid, you miss something. So, had there been a sick child there, and the gentleman with the arrow in the neck, and somebody who had a splinter in their foot, and somebody who was just throwing up for about a day or two, but no fever, obviously the one with the airway compromise and the arrow to the neck, that's a trauma. That's being seen first and foremost. So that's a 1. And the sick kid, depending on, if they were really, really fevered and if their heart rate was really high, they could be a CTAS 2 where they need to be seen within about 15 minutes. Does that happen? No, not a lot of times around here, but we try our best. And really, if you give them Tylenol and Advil, the fever comes down, and then the heart rate comes down, the kid looks better, and then they start drinking. Um, and you're kind of on the right road with that one. The splinter in the toe is like a 5. Like you really shouldn't even be here, but here we are. So unfortunately, you're going to wait like up to 2 hours. Really, you're going to wait probably 4 to 6 hours to be seen in the ER for that kind of concern. And the person who's vomiting, as long as their vitals are kind of within range and they're not having too much pain, you're probably about a 3 to a 4, depending on how long the vomiting's been going on. So you should be seen anywhere from half an hour to an hour.
And in terms of if any patient comes in, I've always wondered this, but and you see the patient, and say, for example, the I give an example, say a drink driving situation, and the patient
Yes.
is the actual drunk driver, and they've come
Yes.
in, and now they're more than likely probably a priority depending on the state of how bad they are. Do you ever
Yeah.
get that kind of anger? The reason
Oh
I want to
yeah.
ask you this is because we're all human at the end of the day, and if an individual or a group of individuals are putting their lives at risk, they're actually self-inflicting this risk on themselves, and you're having to now save them.
Yeah.
How mentally do you deal with that?
Sometimes the less info, the better. Of
Right,
course, if that's the case, police are usually escorting. And truly, usually a drunk driver, because they're more fluid with their body movements, they don't tense up like somebody who's sober would in the car accident. So they actually, 9 times out of 10, they come out really not too badly injured from these car crashes. So, as the worst of it is when, somebody's coming in and it's, you've got the perpetrator as well as the victim, right? So
right.
then you're treating both of them. And then you have to kind of be aware of like, okay, if they're both equally sick, you have to be very careful to just make sure that everybody's getting treated appropriately and trying your best to put your feelings aside, even though we are human. It's just that kind of thing where, yeah, you're getting mad. And so if one of the nurses has got, a family member who's died previously because of a drunk driver, they're going to be extra mad and it's going to be a trigger for them. So knowing your coworkers sometimes can help you kind of navigate a little bit better how people are going to react to things, because you're working together for 5, 6, 10 years. You get to know people.
Yeah,
And so it's, okay, well, this one, why don't you go take care of the victim? I'll take I'll take the drunk driver, and like we'll just do what we need to do. And you hope that the criminal justice system kind of has their fair say, and then the police are in there and doing their testing, and you have to be careful that you're not breaking health information with the police, because theoretically the police have no reason to know any of the patient's information or health status or anything like that. um, but again, the ER is a very large place. It's very open. And if you listen, you can pretty much figure out what's going on anywhere and
right.
everywhere. Because you just overhear the nurses talking, or you overhear the physician and somebody else talking, or hearing about an update to a family member kind of thing. But it's just one of those where it's very, very hard to put sometimes personal feelings aside. And I didn't have too much of a problem with that until we got to COVID, and until we got to a point where people were choosing not to vaccinate, and being and I hate to broad stroke it, but some people were very belligerent about why they weren't vaccinating, and they wanted to kind of, you could feel that they kind of wanted to pick a fight with you about vaccination status, because for a long time we were continuing to ask people if they were vaccinated or not.
Right.
Um, but, the last even 3 years, it's kind of like, well, it really doesn't change anything. It doesn't change how I'm treating them. It's not changing how they're going to be triaged. It doesn't, if you were vaccinated and you've got COVID-like symptoms, I'm still isolating you because you're still infectious. So it really, at a point, there was no sense in asking people if they were vaccinated. And truly, the only person who was getting really upset was me. And
Right.
then it changed my care for those people. So I said, you know what? I'm going to stop asking, because I'm tired of having these conversations. I'm tired of getting into these fights with people. And I'm just going to stop asking, because it's not changing anything other than my my feelings towards the patient, which really puts the patient at risk and then puts me and my license at risk. So let's take all that risk out of the equation, and I'm just going to stop asking.
What was it like then, Jen? I mean, obviously there was so much information on the media, newspapers, and so on, during COVID, and I think what you mentioned in relation to vaccination stuff like that, some people decided to do it, some people decided not, and but what was it like putting all that aside? What was it actually like during that period, um, in that environment? How stressful? How anxious were you? How angry were you? How tired were you? How fatigued were you? Um, what was it like from your opinion?
Yeah. So from my experience, so when everything shut down, right around the 22nd of March because, of course, that's close to my birthday. So it's kind of burned in my memory as a not so great birthday. But when everything first shut down and they were kind of saying, everybody was kind of saying, oh, it's going to be a week, oh, it's going to be 2 weeks, and then it's a month, and then it's 2 months. And it just kind of kept going on and on and on. And at a point, you're kind of like, this isn't going to go away. Like, this isn't going to go. So the first couple of months, like especially March into April, so I had two young kids at the time, so they were 4 and 5. And, now we had no daycare. Now we had no school. I was working straight nights, and my husband was also frontline, so he was working Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, and still going into hospital. So he'd go off to work, and then I'd be up all day with the kids. I'd be lucky if I could kind of sneak a nap in from like 4 to 6 right before I went into work. And then I'd be up all night, and I'd be lucky if I got like a nap on night shift. And then I'd be up all day, and then I'd be up all night, and then I'd be up all day, yeah, like for 4 days.
Right.
So I was completely out of my mind. Absolutely, the fear, the anxiety, the stress, the protocols that changed morning, noon to night. Like every day there was multiple changes to the policies and you couldn't keep up. And, then there was attorneys coming up to be like, oh, we're gonna do your wills for free. I'm
Oh,
like,
you're
pardon?
joking.
No, I wish I was joking.
Attorneys would arrive at
So
the hospitals or for the nurses.
So they just kind of said over social media, and they gave their information to the hospital, so the hospital kind of passed it on to us, and they said, oh, here's all these attorneys willing to do your wills for free. I'm going, so if I didn't think that the majority message was I was going to die to start, definitely think so now.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that wasn't a huge service for them to be offering, and such a blessing for them to want to make sure that everybody was, okay and teed up, and their kids were taken care of, and their spouses were taken care of, and everything was going to be okay, because heaven forbid you caught it and you were one of those people who were intubated and potentially died. Oh my God. Like it was nuts. And, it took, all of a sudden everybody was very, very thankful. The public was so thankful and so appreciative. And, here in Ontario, people were outside at a certain hour banging their pots and pans for shift change. And, the food, there was nonstop food coming into the department, and the thank yous, and, the appreciation was overwhelming. But at the same time, you're like, you guys are the ones usually kicking and spitting and hitting us and yelling at us. So for you to then turn around and have everybody be so thankful was so weird.
Right.
And this whole nurses are heroes kind of movement that went around. It's like, we're not heroes. This is a job. Like, we don't want to be heroes. We don't want to be saints. We don't want to be perfect. We're doing our part. And that's all that we're asking of the rest of the public, is just do your part. Do the 6 feet of separation, and stay at home if you're sick, and isolate, and take care of your loved ones, and test regularly, and don't go to things if you're not feeling well, and all these things. And so when people would be very blatantly going, very quickly back to whatever they were doing pre-pandemic. And, I understand the want to feel like everything's fine. It just was so aggravating, because then I would have people coming into the ER with COVID-like symptoms and then turn out to be COVID positive because some family member wanted to come to a family function and hug everybody and kiss everybody, even though they weren't feeling well. And so now, here are your 80, 90-year-old grandmothers and grandfathers who are immunocompromised, and now they're in hospital sick and fighting for their lives. And, there was no understanding of like, this was your, this was your fault. Like, you chose to do this. Like, you couldn't have waited. Like, there were so many instances of just being completely obliterated, and just so angry at people for not doing what seemed to be the absolute barest of minimum things to keep everybody safe, and especially those, immunocompromised or kids or, all these grandparents having a fit because they couldn't kiss their new grandbabies and they couldn't hang out with the new grandbabies and all this. And it's like, well, it's because of what's going on. Like, of course you can't come over and kiss on the baby. Like, it's it's upsetting and it's uncomfortable, but it's truly a life or death issue, and it was for a long time. So trying to get over that anger and frustration and hurt over, people being exceedingly disrespectful for other people's wishes just to stay safe and stay healthy. It got to you a lot of the times, and it was so, you got so mad. And so the first time we got COVID as a household, was from my mother-in-law. And so she lives with a friend, and the friend had been feeling unwell for 2 days prior to their flying down from Thunder Bay, to come see us. And so they typically, around the kids' birthdays, would come down for 2 weeks, sometimes three, stay with us, help around the house, help with the kids, hang out, do all the fun things. And so my son's birthday was coming up, and he's a severe asthmatic. And so, knowing that my mother-in-law's friend had not been feeling well for 2 days prior, and her friend reaching out to her own family and saying, like, oh, I don't know. And their family saying, like, oh, no, you need to test, like, you shouldn't be going, that kind of thing. And they decided to, my mother-in-law made the decision they were going to fly down anyways. She wanted what she wanted.
Yeah.
And so not only have you now, exposed the whole flight, you've now exposed the poor driver so I actually had hired a driver to bring them from Toronto down to Hamilton Way as a kind of Mother's Day gift. And, you've exposed the driver. And so they weren't in the house. So they arrive, it's kiss, kiss, hug, hug. This is maybe the first year after COVID. And so they come in the house and they sit down, and my mother-in-law goes like, oh, she hasn't been feeling too well. Do you happen to have any COVID tests? I'm like, pardon me? I'm like, well, I've got young children. Of course I've got COVID tests. Like, sure. And so I test both of them, and sure enough, her friend comes up positive immediately. And I've never seen a positive come up so fast. And I'm like,
Right.
you've got to be joking me right now. So the kids were still at school. My husband was still at work. And so I'm having to call my husband and tell his mother, like, you need to talk to your son because, like, I don't know what to do. So now I've been exposed because we've just done the kiss, kiss, hug, hug thing at the door. And now this is the case. So, we had decided that, well, it wouldn't make any sense for the three of us to go stay in a hotel somewhere. So the friend was going to stay in the basement. My mother-in-law would sleep I think actually she stayed in the basement with her friend. But she would wear a mask when she was kind of up and try and stay away from the kids kind of thing. But sure enough, the next day she was positive. The next day I was positive. And my son and my husband also got sick. My daughter, I don't think she actually ever got sick, which is like a miracle. But, we were having to go twice within 24 hours to the children's emergency room with my son because, he was really struggling. And I'm still positive, he's positive. We're going to the children's center where I know that there are children on chemotherapy waiting in this waiting room.
Yeah.
And we'd gone, and you know they had told us that they'd seen over 200 patients in that 24 hours, which is staggering for them. And thankfully we were in and out the first time just because I think we went at an odd time. But the second time we were there for hours and hours, and the only benefit was that I had happened to work in that emergency room, so I already knew the docs, I already knew the nurses. They were more than familiar with my son because we'd been in and out a couple of times to this point. But you want to talk about anger and just seething. Like I couldn't look at her for a long time. And she still has yet to say sorry. She takes no responsibility for it. And unfortunately that just kind of makes things worse.
Does it,
So
does it make you in terms more cynical as well with society in general? Because you mentioned there with regards to previously with people like, banging pots and pans and,
Yeah.
nurses are heroes and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
uh, I can't imagine myself because I'd probably find that more pressure
Yeah.
where you're going into work where you're just trying to do your job like
Yeah.
anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's your profession and that's what you're good
Mhm.
at. And then you
Yep.
have this extra responsibility of people banging pots and these are great, but then the opposite side is that people are not kind of following. I'd hate to say the word rude rules, just in case somebody's listening to this and kind of like, well, what do you mean following rules? Because I don't want to be a hypocrite myself. But people are not helping the situation, if that's probably the best way of probably
Yes,
putting it.
you're not taking all the extra precautions that you could be taking to make sure
Yeah,
that everybody's super safe kind of thing.
yeah. So
Um,
I mean, how cynical would you be now, or are you cynical at all? Have you kind of moved on from that?
uh, you have moments of being cynical, you know, it's hard to get away from those feelings. It's hard to move on. With the not wanting to vaccinate issue. Um, do I understand why some people weren't? Absolutely. You had chronic health conditions that we didn't quite know if, the medicine would interact with your medications, or you've got transplant or something that there was no evidence on what would happen. So you were a little bit leery. Okay, I understand that. It's these people who, well, the government's not going to tell me what I'm going to do, and that kind of thing, where it just it irked you. So being cynical about the population, I mean, you can't help but, like, I was already cynical before the pandemic. Like, the pandemic just pushed all of us right over the edge, in regards to, seeing the worst of humanity at its absolute peak.
Yeah.
Um, so it's better now, only because, time kind of tends to blur the memories a bit. So I mean, we're almost at 5 years in March, which is astounding.
It's so quick,
Um,
wasn't it? It's as if we
it
jumped
was
forward in
like
time.
it was insane, because, like, there were some moments where it felt like time stood still and nothing
Hmm.
moved, and you did your best to get through the day, and yet you're like, it's still this week, like we're still in the same week. Like, I remember people talking about it feeling like it was still March, right? Like, oh, we're still in March, we're still in April, like, why isn't time moving forward? And then all of a sudden, like, as soon as things kind of opened up again and we were allowed to be all over and do the things we normally regularly do, sure enough, we're all distracted to the point where, like, oh, is the summer over already?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's true
So
though.
it's kind of funny.
What about then, let's kind of the environment of the work in terms of, was it toxic at the time? Well, you keep kind of, not say skip over COVID situation, but just in general,
Yeah.
um, has it changed over the years from when you initially began um, becoming a nurse and then to kind of now? Has the job become more stressful? Are you getting the support from colleagues, from mentors, from management? Is it a toxic place to work? In your own opinion,
Yeah.
tell me
It's
everything.
so I've been in it 16 years, so it definitely has changed in the 16 years. And my first job, where it was just me and one other registered nurse with two RPNs, like, there wasn't a lot to do a lot of days. So you kind of twiddled your thumbs, and you drank, I didn't drink coffee before getting that first job, because, like, really all we did was sit around a lot, because there really wasn't a lot going on. um, but had a toxic manager, like, just the worst bully I think I've ever encountered. And, was there for 5 years, and put up with it, and getting out of that instance, and then coming back down south to, a stroke center, and having it be, all these patients and all these people, and so much going on, that there was so much going on that you didn't have time really to pick apart your coworkers, because you were too busy actually working. So, had so much fun there, and it was such a blast, and it was such a good crew, and I miss them all dearly. Um, but then you get to, the children's ER, where there was another bully there that kind of made things not so hot. And, I decided to leave within a year, and then went to the trauma center, and the trauma center had another bully who flat out screamed at me twice in a month in front of my patients and their family members and all this kind of thing. And then the management kind of made it out to be that it was my problem, that I wasn't coping well with what was going on. I'm like, do you mean the part where she's screaming at me in the middle of the ER? I don't understand. So left that job and in my current job now, where yes, there was a bully, but on kind of different lines. So I didn't really see her too much, and she's just kind of kooky and was very obviously doing her own thing. Um, but with COVID, it was one of those things where you actually spent more time with your work colleagues because, we went from seeing maybe 50 to 60 people in a day down to like 10 to 15 in a day for months. And because people were too afraid to come to the ER, if it wasn't a true emergency, people weren't actually coming in. So we're all kind of sitting around going like, this is really weird. Like not only are people being super thankful, but it's a very, I hate to use the Q word, but it was very quiet and not a lot going on. So you're going like, this is just the weirdest sensation ever. And the problem was when people finally did come in, they were so much sicker than they normally were because they would have come in a week ago, with this, oh, they've got a little bit of a cough and they're a little bit of short of breath and they've got lung disease. So, they just need a little bit of help. So normally we just give them a couple of puffers, we give them some medications, and we'd send them off on their merry little way. Whereas now we're 7 days past where they normally would have come in and they're just so short of breath and struggling and really unwell. And now it's like, well, now we're looking at an ICU admission because you're so sick. So it was weird to see this very swift shift in dynamics, not just of the public, but just of the patients. And with it came, again, the very fast-paced change of rules and policies and procedures. And 1 minute COVID's droplet, and the next minute it's airborne, and the next minute it's contact, and you're having to change what you're going to wear when you go into a potential COVID room. Because again, the ER, we didn't know who was positive or not positive. So theoretically, everybody was positive until proven otherwise. And that took up a lot of resources to like go in and out of a room, especially like if an alarm's beeping for no good reason. And you're just like, oh, like I don't want to get all gowned up just to go back into that room, but I have to.
Yeah.
And, my one coworker who was the bully, she kind of had the idea that COVID wasn't real, that, it was all made up, that she didn't believe in any of it. And this became very evident when at one point she had gowned up to go into a room of a patient's room. Apparently, she had stuck her head out and called out to me and my work colleague who were, 20 feet away or something. And I didn't hear her. My ward clerk tells me that she did actually do it and she did actually hear her, but I don't remember. And so instead of degowning and taking everything off and washing her hands like you're supposed to, she then, in her full gear, after she'd already gone into the patient room, came out, went through the IV cart to like get what she needed, and then went back into the room. And my jaw dropped and I was like, oh, this isn't good. I'm like, it was one of the first patients that we thought actually could have been COVID. And like my buddy and I are like looking at each other being like, did she just do that? Like, I can't believe she just did that. So that nurse takes that patient out because sure enough, they had to be intubated. They had to be taken to one of our hospitals with an ICU that takes people with who are intubated and like the tube down their throat. And she comes back and I said, you guys have to trash this whole cart. Like there's probably thousands of dollars worth of materials on here, but you have to trash this cart because I don't know what she's touched and I can't bring this home to my kid or my husband. And so sure enough, we toss the cart. And when she comes back, she sees this and she goes, well, whose idea was this? And I says, well, it was mine. She goes, we need to talk. I'm like, yes, we do. And so we go into the resuscitation bay that's empty, and she kind of says, like, I don't understand why you threw all that out. That was all, yeah, it was fine. What are you doing? And I said, well, like I know back in the day when somebody was just on droplet precautions, we'd just like hold our breath and pop in and out of the room, or like you just quickly put on a mask and pop in and out. It's not like that anymore. We can't just pop in and out. We have to like fully take off everything, wash our hands, wait for that to dry, get what we need, and then go back into the, like, gown up again and go back into the room. It's super time consuming. And I thought it was just a comprehension issue. So I'm like, we just can't do it like that anymore. She goes, well, I saw you guys standing there and I called out and I know I can yell. And I said, I know you can yell. And she goes, well, you guys were just standing there, so I thought I'd do it on purpose. I said, pardon me? She goes, yeah, like I was trying to get your attention, so I did it on purpose. I'm like, so you fully understand that you weren't supposed to go into that room and come out and then touch all the things because you knew that there was a risk associated with that. And yet, not only did you willfully do that, you maliciously did that and are now copping to it. Like, you're kidding. And so I lost it. I emailed my manager. Excuse me. I emailed my manager. I did all the forms. I like lost it. And nothing happened with her. Absolutely nothing. So I'm like, you know what? Forget this. I can't put my kids at risk. I'm 100% burned out at this point. This is like May, June of the first year. And I'm like, I'm out. I'm done. I can't do it. And so I went to the recovery room. So after you go into the operating room and you come out, you stay with the recovery room for an hour or two while you kind of come out of the sedation, and then you go back either to day surgery or back up to your bed on the floor. And it was probably the most protected area you could be in because you knew everybody's COVID status coming in and out. If anybody had COVID, if they could put off the surgery, they would for a day or two to try and make sure that they're not um, as infectious. Because again, you're intubating that person, you're full on opening their lungs into the open air and then exposing everybody in that room to COVID. So they were really trying to not do that if it wasn't an absolute emergency. So it was a lovely place to work. Learned a lot, and it was definitely not the ER, but after about a year, I ended up going back to the ER, but with the caveat that I wouldn't be on her line.
So why do you think, Jen? I mean, you got in touch with management, you sent emails and
Yep.
messages. Why do you think, in your own opinion, they didn't respond? Because we see a lot of stuff. Oh, before I continue, in Ireland we call bullies gobshites. Have you ever heard that word?
No.
No, you can Google it later. But we call them
Gosh.
gobshites. Okay, so
Oh,
it's a
word of the
very
day.
it's a very it's a very Irish word. Well, you can Google it later. Generally, when we see these hospitals and we see pretty much any business, it's always this marketing vibe, you know, team players and
Yes.
support each other and inclusive and diverse and all this type of stuff. But yet, when you want something or you want a bit of support, you
Yep.
don't get that. I'm just wondering if the places you've worked in before, did they have this kind of what's the word, their values, their company values, or was
Yeah.
it just total nonsense?
Uh, it seemed like anytime I had complained about somebody's behavior, and in various hospital systems, so different managements, different management styles, different sizes of hospitals, I was always told, well, that's just that person. And that was the standard line that I got whenever I was kind of bringing up the fact that somebody's behavior was absolutely unacceptable. And the standard line was, oh, that's just them.
Right.
Pardon me. But yet you've got posters up on the wall to say like, oh, this is zero violence, zero tolerance for violence, da 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 da. And I'm like, so does that only apply to the patients? Because it absolutely should be applying to staff. Because I mean, we're adult males and females. Like, why are we picking on each other to the point of making each other cry in a professional environment that's supposed to be dedicated to caring? Like, it blows my mind.
Yeah, that must be. I mean, I know. I think it's terrible that you've had to leave jobs because of the bullying that went on. But it just seems to be a lot of companies now. It's all about making money, and as you said
Yep.
yourself, they have these values on the wall, and then pretty much they don't follow them. I think why an
Yeah.
individual like you wouldn't stay there is because you look at the values probably when you're applying for the job, or they've asked you to join the team, and you look, oh, I like that, I like that, I like that, and then you get
Yep.
into the job a few months later and you realize none of this applies to what you guys are actually are telling us. So I can understand
Yes.
exactly, and it must be very frustrating, especially in a medical field. So chat to me then about this. intuition. So what do you mean by intuition?
So yeah, the whole idea of just trusting your gut. So many, if not all women, the easiest way to explain it is, have you ever gone into a bar or you've gone into a room or gone to a meeting and you've just gotten this pit in your stomach when you're meeting somebody and it's, they haven't said anything, they really haven't done anything, they don't look harmful, but yet there's something in your body that's screaming at you that's saying that something's wrong. Like this is dangerous, you need to get out of the situation, is probably the easiest way to kind of explain it. It happens to men too, obviously, but from a very young age, women, we kind of are innately taught that, this whole lifetime is about self-preservation. And the sooner you can develop this kind of gut feeling, the better your odds are at surviving kind of thing. It's a very primal kind of base or instincts. So when you take that instinct and you apply it into nursing or medicine, it could be that somebody comes into triage, I'm getting the story, I'm getting their vitals, and there's just something about them, either the pallor of their skin. So sometimes people can have like very pale or kind of yellow or like a ruddy red or super sweaty for no good reason. There's those physical things that you can kind of look at and assess, but yet there's also those things that you're just like, the story the story doesn't really throw up any red flags. Their vitals are not the greatest, but they're not horrible. But I've just got this sensation that something is going to happen and something, so we need to kind of get on this before this goes the wrong way. And being able to use that and trust it and follow through with it, on so many occasions has led me to be able to catch things before, excuse me, before anything worse happens. And so in kind of writing my book and talking about all of my experiences with intuition, it's going into all these stories that I've gotten. It's like, here's this thread that weaves itself the whole way through. And it was me trusting my gut. And whether or not I knew at the time that that's what I was doing, or I just thought I was playing a game, something to try and keep my interest while I was triaging, 100 patients over 12 hours, you'd kind of very quickly be able to tell who was really, really sick, or you just had this sensation that like something was coming. And it's the same thing when patients tell you they're going to die, because they do. Every now and again, somebody will look you dead in the eyes and they're very sick, and they'll look at you in your eyes and be like, I'm going to die. And there's nothing scarier than that feeling, because I understand completely and I'm here, I'm right here, and you're in the right hands, but that means that something's coming and I don't know what's coming. So that's usually an indication that like, oh my God, we got to get on this really, really fast and figure out what's going on sooner rather than later in case this patient crashes, which they always do.
Do you think it's
It's
spiritual, Jen, or do you think it's experience, or why do you think that you have this gut feeling and intuition? Why do you think
Yeah, I
do
think it's a
do do,
mix.
do other nurses experience it as well, or other doctors,
They
or
do.
they
Yeah.
do?
If you ask any nurse who's got more than about 3, 4 years experience in, have you ever been in a situation where you thought that things weren't going in the right direction? And did you do anything about it? And most people, especially when they're just kind of getting started, it's like, well, I did feel like something was off, but I'm new and I second guessed myself and I wasn't sure and I didn't do anything. And then sure enough, something happened. Like a critical incident happened or the patient coded or something like that. And it's when we start having these feelings that, if we can just kind of come to terms with they're happening,
Right.
kind of lean into it just a little bit. Is it a mix of experience and intuition, a little bit of spiritual, a little bit of what's happening right in front of you mixed with some experience? Absolutely. But sometimes there will just be things that pop into my head that I'm going, oh, that's kind of an odd thought. Like, I wonder where that's coming from. And, you kind of follow it, or you follow the patient through their ER visit and you go, like, oh, I really thought it was going to be like maybe their appendix. Like, they kind of had these signs and symptoms that were a little bit atypical than your typical presentation for pancreatitis or for appendicitis. I wonder if that's what that was. And so you tend to find like it's almost like you tag these people that you're like, I need to watch what you're going to do throughout your stay because I want to know if I was right or not, you know? And so you kind of watch them move through their day in the ER or their night in the ER. And sure enough, you'll get a something back that says, oh yeah, sure enough, this was way more than we thought it was. And now we've got to go down this route or that route or whatever else. It's the same thing with patients who have been admitted or about to be admitted, and you've got a concern. You know, you bring these patients in, we get things going, but suddenly things change. Patients all of a sudden getting worse, and you're going like, oh, I don't know what's happening. And so the easiest way is just to go to your doc and say, like, hey, I just don't know. Like, I know you can check on this patient. If you could, that would be great. I'm just not sure about what's going on. And it's being able to express that to somebody. And typically, thankfully, my ER docs are phenomenal. And they know when I say something's not right, can you just come have a look? That I'm not messing around. Like, I'm not doing this every single shift, but when I do it, I'm dead serious about it. Like, I need you to come and take a look at this patient. And most ER docs who've got more than a couple years experience in will absolutely kind of stop what they're doing, come and see my patient. Sometimes the newer physicians that go, oh, it's your gut. Oh, really? Where's the science in that? And they kind of like put you off, and you're like, all right, you can put me off all you want, but guess what? Something's going to happen. And so you just chart your little behind off and make sure that your behind's covered, and you go, you know, no new orders received by physician at such and such a time. And you do another set of vitals, and you keep an eye on the patient, and you hope you're wrong. But the number of times you're right is just like, oh man, like I saw that coming from a mile away. Like, why weren't we prepared for this, you know? So it's getting people more comfortable with being able to vocalize that, yes, I'm having this feeling and I need to do something about it. So the science alone, like obviously I couldn't put out the book without the science behind it because otherwise I just get lambasted for sure. I
As
still I
always,
still
as
may
always.
I still may get fully lambasted to be true, to be
Yeah.
fair. But like there is so much science, so much peer-reviewed, you know, evidence-based scholarly articles, not just on intuition. Like the information for intuition goes back 20, 25 years, but the information that's nursing specific, so intuition in nursing is also very much a focus point for a lot of these papers and recent papers, like within the last 5 years, because, you know, I'm trying to be a good nurse who's following her evidence-based practice. And so, you know, if it's proven, if we've got multiple different sources of evidence and it's supporting, like, why aren't we teaching this? And so thankfully there was one teacher in my fourth year of university who had said, you know what, trust your gut. And that was kind of where she left it at. She just kind of said it and then and didn't do much more with it. But I am so thankful that she just mentioned it, because had she not, would I have put this idea off for another 5 years? Would I have ever really come into this idea? I don't know. But, you know, insight versus intuition, it's they're getting closer and closer to coming to being able to describe it with the neurochemicals and what's going on in the environment and all this kind of thing. Should you be using your intuition alone? Absolutely not. You should be following your hospital's policies and procedures as you normally would, but think of it as just like another nursing skill that we need to hone.
It's interesting. You were mentioning there before about, the ER doctors and stuff. Like, kind of, if anybody is starting within the field, medical field or nursing profession, how do you manage that speaking to a doctor to say, look, I think this might be X, Y, Z, or I think we're wrong there. How do you
Yeah.
manage that without actually losing the doctor?
Yeah. You get very good. And I don't know if it's just kind of a female perspective, because I've noticed that the more I talk about intuition, the more obviously I'm talking about how to bring that back into your practice and then go to your doctors. And a lot of it is coming at it from the angle of like, I just don't know. And I'd like to know what you think. And I'm just not sure. And being very, like, not necessarily passive about it, but being very, like, I'm leaning on your expertise in this kind of, being a very soft voice, being very kind of feminine, which again, I don't know why I'm doing it, but it gets results. Um,
Us men,
you
we
know,
always fall for that. We do.
but I do it to my female docs too. Like I do the
Mm.
same thing, and it's not. because you do want to come at it very much recognizing that, yes, I'm an expert in my space, but I'm not a doctor. I don't have that education. I don't have that practice. I don't have that experience. They know so much more than I do in their sphere, and I have my sphere. So in my sphere, this is what I feel like is going on. I would like your opinion. And it's that collaborative approach that I feel works best. And thankfully, we're super collaborative in Canada. Like so proud of us for being so collaborative, because like I can go to my doctors without fear of repercussion of them like going like, oh my God, she's crazy, like she's just off her rocker or whatever else. I mean, they can, absolutely they can. Feel free, but guess what? Stuff's gonna happen, and then you're gonna go, oh, well, Jenn was right. Maybe she did know what she was talking about. Maybe she did know more of what was going on. Because again, the nurse sees you for the majority of his shift, right? Like we're the ones seeing you for multiple hours in a day, whereas the physician is seeing you maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes if you're lucky in a 24-hour period,
Yeah.
where the nurses are there monitoring you, and if there's a change, we can see it, right? So the doc who's on that day, the patient may be admitted, they're covered by a team of docs for internal medicine. So this doc hasn't seen this patient before. So we can say like, hey, I was here yesterday. I saw this patient. This is a change from yesterday. I don't know what's going on, but I would appreciate if maybe we did a CT scan, or maybe we did repeat blood work, or an X-ray or something, because like there's more going on than what we realize, and she or he is not going in the right direction. Like this patient is deteriorating, be it slowly, and thankfully slowly, but we need to kind of get on this now. And honestly, the more people, they can say I'm nuts, that's fine, that's cool, whatever. But they're going to see that A, it's not just me, but B, the other nurses are doing it. Are they at a point where they're comfortable enough to bring this to you? um or they might not be comfortable enough to bring it to the doc, but another nurse might bring it to me to be like, hey, I'm just not sure about what's going on, can you take a look at my patient real quick? What do you think? Am I doing what I need to be doing? Am I missing something? Like, what's going on? I can come assess the patient. We can go, okay, definitely looks like something's maybe up. And then I'll go to the doc. Like, that's fine. That's why we have the levels of nurses, right? Those who've got experience welcoming in those who are new to the field or new to emergency medicine. Emergency is its own beast. Like, it is not your typical floor where you can predict pretty well the flow of the day. The flow of the day can change, the second the doors open and somebody stumbles in carrying a child. Like, there's your day just gone.
Right.
So it can change in an instant, and you have to be okay with that. So, you get very good at, do what you can when you can do it. Don't put things off, you know, get on things when you're getting new orders, do the orders right away, so that heaven forbid something happen and you're taken away for 2 hours, then that other patient isn't at a loss, right? So it's about planning your care. It's about being okay with the chaos and the change, but sometimes it's just not a fit, and that's okay, because there are so many people for so many places. The ER is not for everybody, just like the OR, like the emergent or the operating room. I would be bored to tears. I would just lose my mind. It's cold, it's slow. You're standing in one place for long periods of time. It is absolutely not my cup of tea. But kudos to those nurses who that fits their personality. They're comfortable with that. They specialize in that. Cool. Just, you know, don't moan and complain when the ER nurse sends you, a dumpster fire of a patient, because, we just put on enough band-aids to stop the bleeding so that they could get to the OR. So don't come at us for not doing like the pre-op checklist when the patient was dead when they first come in the door, kind of thing.
So the book itself, I'm actually being nosy at your website. So it's
Ooh,
nursejen.ca, and I do love the photograph.
thank you.
The nursing intuition, how to trust your gut, save your insanity, and survive your nursing career. So where can listeners buy your book?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon for pre-order right now for the ebook. Book itself is coming out October 29th. It should be available in all your local bookstores because I'm putting it out with Ingram Sparks. But it will be available first and foremost on Amazon. And if you love it, please leave me a review so that I can try and, get it into the hands of somebody who needs it.
So what else, Jen? I mean, I'm looking as I've been nosing your website as well. So generally, services. What services do you provide? I know you have a shop there. There's some very nice products. You have 100 shifts, a care planner for nurses.
Yep.
You have a nurse's happy place. You have lots of stuff there. So sell yourself, Jen. Go for
Fully embrace the sell yourself option. Yeah, this is just my way of trying to support nurses in all the different ways that I didn't feel supported going through it. So the 100 Shifts Journal, in the beginning of it is a lot of education, like easy to follow education about how to, set boundaries and some self-care and learn about your own triggers so that you can kind of prevent those from interfering with your work and causing problems later in life. And then with each day, each shift that you go through, you can you can journal, what went good, what went bad, what did you learn, what was the best part of the day, the worst part of the day, notes about things that you want to maybe look up later, medications or pathophysiology that you don't have a chance to look at when you're actually, running around doing it. But the best part is, we all have those days that absolutely you have your behind handed to you. And in that, it's hard not to get caught up in your own head to be like, what am I doing? I don't know. Am I even supposed to be a nurse? I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not learning fast enough. I'm failing, and you get in your head about all the negativity. But wouldn't it be so nice to go back into your own journal and go, well, this time, 2 months ago, I advocated for a patient when that was my first time advocating for somebody, and the patient did well because of it. This was the first time I started an IV. This is the first time I was able to change an entire bed with somebody in it. Kind of all these skills that you learn on the job that it's hard for the schooling to kind of really integrate at all because there's just so many aspects of nursing that are more often than not hands-on. So, celebrate all the little wins because you forget about them so easily. The first time you talk to somebody about their resuscitation status, do you want everything done? Do you know what CPR actually looks like and actually does to the body? Talking to families about that kind of thing, getting better with challenging family dynamics and how better to manage them. And it's all these little wins. When you put them together, that's what makes a nurse. It's not one shift that makes or breaks a nurse. Well, it could be one shift that breaks the nurse, but it's
You're selling
it's
it
all
beautifully, Jen. Selling it beautifully. All the
it's
future nurses out there,
they're
don't
like,
do it.
forget
Otherwise
this,
you
I'm over it.
Well, what would you say to like anybody that wants to become a nurse? I mean, there's wonderful doctors and
Yeah.
nurses, everybody in the medical
Yeah.
field, all the way down from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
What would you
If
say to anybody
you
wanting to join the field?
we welcome you with open arms. If somebody does not welcome you with open arms, you call me and I will call them. We're here for you if you need us. The culture of eating your young is changing. It is getting better. We are getting better with being open and welcoming to new staff. If you're on a new unit, you're starting out, somebody's bullying you, you've brought it to management, give it 6 months. If it's not better in 6 months, adios. Like they need you more than you need them. So understand from a very early perspective that you are the one holding the power here because there's always going to be nursing shifts available. There's always going to be nursing jobs available, and there's always a million different ways you can utilize that nursing degree. You do not have to stay at bedside if that's what makes you happy and is that what fills your cup up and fills your soul. Sure, do that. If it does not, find something else. We need policymakers. We need people working in research. We need people working, infection control or occupational health and all these things. Like there are so many routes to go. But if you do not love it, that's okay. It's not for everybody. If you're finding that you're having a really tough time, get out. Do not do it just for the money, because you will be eaten alive. Not just by staff, because we can very quickly figure out who's in it for the right reasons and who's not.
Right.
But you're going to be miserable. Like, if you are gaining no actual satisfaction from this job, it is too soul sucking for you to do it without getting some love back and getting some feeling of like you're doing the right thing and you're helping out and all these things. So if you're not doing it for the right reasons, cool. Maybe business or something else is more your speed. Like, this is not the job that you do for the money. Does it pay well? Absolutely, but it takes time and it takes a lot of your soul. So debate that and see if that's where you land. But, there are so many of us who are here for you. So get on LinkedIn. You can get in on LinkedIn as a nursing student, find people, find kind of the nursing groups who are there to support people, find the Instagram pages of nurse creators that are funny, find ones that are advocating for yourself and for patients. Find these people who can really instill a love of nursing in you, because it is hard. It is absolutely so, so hard. And make sure you get not just one therapist, but a second one in case the first one's not available.
Yes.
Take the therapy. If you're prescribed the medications, take the medications. Do what you need to do to keep you healthy, because just as I was talking with somebody else earlier, and it's the same thing, when you're on an airplane and the cabin pressure changes and the masks fall down, what do they tell you? They
Put your
tell
oxygen on
you,
first. That's it.
put your oxygen on first. You
Yeah.
have to treat you first. So we're the worst at caring for ourselves, and that needs to change. So, you know, find an area that fits. Sometimes the nursing portion isn't quite what you're really passionate about, but you find a really good team. A good team can make all the difference in your everyday day-to-day life. It
So,
doesn't
so where
necessarily.
can listeners get in touch with you, Jen? So, are you on the
Yes,
LinkedIn, as you mentioned? Are you on Instagram,
I'm
or Facebook?
absolutely on the LinkedIn. You can find me at Jennifer Johnson, BSCNRN. Don't come for me. There's just a ton of Jennifer Johnsons, so I had to pick that one. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at ernurse.jen, Jenn. You can find me on Amazon. If you search up Jennifer A. Johnson, RN, you can find all of my journals and the books and everything. And you can find me at nursegen.ca, as well as rxforgrowth.com, which is the newer website that I'll have to update things.
Well, thanks so much,
But
Jen, for
yeah,
talking today on the Wellbeing
no
and Career World
worries.
podcast. Great insight. For more information, as Jen said, she has a wonderful website here as well, which is nursegen.ca. You can get in touch with her on any of the social medias that she's mentioned before. So thank you so much, Jen, for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's been a blast.